All right, this is our last part of week 13. We're going to finish it up talking about some of the various comprehension strategies. But just a reminder, the strategies are not the means in and of themselves. They are the means to a better understanding of the text. So, predicting is making an informed guess about what will come next using prior knowledge with clues from the text. It's a hypothesis to test while reading. When readers make predictions, they set expectations for reading, which in turn gives them a purpose and further motivates them. Predicting before can help to focus the student's attention. Predicting during can help to guide the student's reading. And then at the end, you should definitely go back and evaluate predictions after to help with recall of information. Next is recognizing text structure. It's important to identify the way that text is organized. This can help with recall of information and identifying key information from the text. These are the various text structures that you might see: the narrative text structure or a story structure, a description, cause and effect, main idea details, comparing and contrasting, problem and solution, and chronological order. So it's important to draw students' attention to the way the text is structured, because that will help them to navigate the text, to retain information, and also to find information. Next is asking questions. Generating questions engages the readers in the text. They are more engaged when they come up with their own questions. This can serve as a form of self-assessment. Teaching students to ask questions and look for answers helps build and monitor motivation. And then on the flip side, we have answering questions, the ability to find answers to questions, knowing how to locate the needed information. Question and answer relationships, like I mentioned before with our student Mark. So there are different types of relationships. First, we have in the text. The two types of questions would be right there, or think and search, where you have to kind of search through the text to find the information, or the more in my head questions, which are inferential. So either they're completely on your own in your head, which would be like critical questioning or creative questions, and then author and me, which is more of your common inferential or interpretive, where you're trying to decipher the author's intent or purpose or meaning. Constructing mental images is our next strategy, aka visualizing, using imagery to promote the active processing of text, also providing a structure for organizing and recalling text. It can be supported by visuals in the text or completely unaided. Next, we have summarizing, which is a brief statement containing the essential information of the passage. It requires the reader to distill the information and really figure out what's important. It requires a deep analysis of the text, and those struggling with comprehension also struggle to summarize. This is another feature I saw in a different reading teacher article. I think you guys might be noticing a trend that I like to plug the reading teacher. But this is from an article called Comprehension at the Core, which was in a recent reading teacher. And the authors who've written many texts, Stephanie Harvey and Anne, not too sure how to say her last name, who will both be at the IRA conference, where they came up with this continuum, starting with literal questions, proceeding all the way to actively using knowledge, where they're having to take the new knowledge and apply it with what they've learned prior, and they kind of delineate different steps along this continuum. But what I love is they include teacher prompts and questions that would correlate with that, you know, type of comprehension. So within literal questions, that includes how many, what is, where, who, when. Retelling is more of the what happened in this story, what was it about, what happened first, next, what did the character do. So this is more about the events in the story. Merging thinking with content. So what do you think about this? What did the text make you think about? What does this remind you of? So doing more critical thinking, making some connections, acquiring knowledge. What did you learn that you think is important? And then all the way up here. So I'll give you a second just to read that over. Thought this might be a great tool to keep wherever you do your small group reading, to probe students so that you're not only asking questions in one of these areas, or if you do identify that your student really needs help with retelling, then you're really focusing on those types of questions. All right, teaching comprehension strategies. So again, going back to what was discussed in the Presley article that was optional, was that direct instruction is important, but also making sure to scaffold and gradually fade the teacher support. So you want to explain the strategy, model it, guide students in using it, and then also assess them. Graphic organizers can be helpful for teaching students about comprehension strategies and can also be a scaffold for them. Using nonverbal or verbal prompts to coach them to use the strategies. Cooperative learning, perhaps where they're in a book club and they have a group where each person has a different role, requiring them to employ different strategies. Reading aloud, where you can model. Contextualized instruction. So again, teaching content via, comprehension strategies. If you're looking at ancient Egypt and you have a text with a structure of chronological order, that would be a great way for you to teach sequencing and events and text structure, but an authentic practice at that. So making sure to contextualize instruction. Mental modeling, like thinking aloud. Also front-loading students by teaching the strategy and then having them apply it to the content. Inquest is an interesting idea of having students take on the role of the character and having other students interview them from the perspective of that character. Also reader response through discussion or in writing. And there are some other ideas on Titanium resources I posted. Assessment of comprehension. Hopefully you have a few ideas by now, but it should be ongoing, informal assessment, not just state test at the end of the year with comprehension questions. Retellings can be a form of comprehension assessment, as well as student think alouds can be an informal assessment. A cloze exercise or a maze exercise, which is a multiple choice cloze. Question answering, but take a look at what types of questions you're asking. Maybe you want to only ask a specific type, or you want to have a broad assessment with many different types. All right is where everybody writes responses. All right, that's pretty much what I have for you this week. Hopefully you've determined some appropriate measures to assess comprehension this week, and you feel better about reporting and analyzing the results from the comprehension assessments. Remember, see page 430 of the DeWitt's article for a great table you could use, and you're prepared to discuss next steps for comprehension instruction, possibly highlighting where within that graphic organizer I showed you within that map is the breakdown. Is the breakdown in decoding at the word level? Is the breakdown within fix-up strategies and metacognition? Is the breakdown in vocabulary? Where is that? All right, to launch you, I have a quote from an article I was reading by Fisher, Douglas Fisher and Nancy Fry from Principal Leadership, and they say the types of questions that students are asked about a text influence how they read it. So here again, we're talking about the implications of the decisions you're making as an educator. The types of questions that students are asked influence how they read it. If students are asked recall and recitation questions, they learn to read for that type of information. If they are asked synthesis questions, they learn to read for that type of information. Unfortunately, many of the questions that students are asked are about personal connections, which may not even require them to have read the text at all. So something to think about. What types of questions are you asking the student? Are they text dependent? Are they pushing the student's thinking? So a way to beef up expectations, which is exactly what the Common Core is doing, and really make sure that students are reading the text. Here are 7 types of text-dependent questions that require text evidence. General understanding questions, whether or not they get the gist of what's going on. Key details and questions about the events in the story. Vocabulary questions, not just definitions, but having them use the context of the text to determine the meaning. Questions about the text structure, how the text is organized, author's purpose and supporting author's purpose with text evidence, inferences, both relational and causal, which we spoke about, and then lastly, questions regarding opinions, arguments, and intertextual connections. All right, have a great week. After this, we just have 4 weeks to go and a few more reflections, and then we'll be done.